So, before we go any further, it'll be good to learn a few things. So, when you look at what we had done with the Ignode code, you would see that it uses LangGraph, right? And in order to really understand what's happening, it may be good to understand a few certain principles, right? You see there are a few things to find here. And we'll just go over LangGraph very quickly. Now, there are a lot of tutorials on YouTube where you can get information about LangGraph, but I'm just gonna go over this very quick. Feel free to just use any of the tutorials out there on YouTube. They're great, and they should be able to explain. Like LangGraph generally is a graph-based framework, right, for building multi-step stateful agents, right? So basically, you're able to create AI agents with full control over how they flow, right? So it's built on the LangChain ecosystem, and it supports the ability for the agent to be able to loop around or follow different loops within the graph to maybe achieve a certain desired output, right? So there's three main concepts we should know about. Now, basically a state. And if you look at this, you'd see a state is a shared memory that flows through the entire graph. Every node can read from and write to it, right? So basically you can have it more as a way to store data as things progress through your state. And if you look at the Ignode UI, you would see here in the start, there are some variables being defined. Workflow input, agent messages, right? And you could decide to even add more. If you decide to add one more, it pops up there. So let's say I want to store state of all output. And basically what you're doing here is you can add a description also. You're defining the state, right? The agent state. And let's go back to our generated code. You could see that workflow input and workflow output was added right there when it generated it. So within the state, you can, set a variable and have the agents be able to access that variable, right? So you can see here we have agent messages, right, set in the state. And the state was passed to this node researcher agent. And you could see here that in the input message, it accessed the agent messages from the state. So basically, that's how it's being accessed, and also it can send, put back information in the state. So that's just a brief overview on states there, right? So you can store the conversation messages like we just showed, or status of a task, and just pass it across the different nodes. Within the tools, you won't be able to access the states, but within the actual node, you should be able to access the state. And that brings us to our next concept, the nodes. Now, the nodes are the individual steps in the workflow, right? And if you look at it here, if you go back to our code down here, you'll see we have one node, right? Which is the research agent. There's also a start and an end. Now, the start points to that node, and that node goes back to the end, right? And essentially that shows what's here on the canvas right here, right? So go back here. And so basically the nodes are individual steps in your workflow. Each node receives a state, does work, and returns an updated state. And if you look at this code also here that we just looked at, right, you would see that this is a node, right? It received the state, right? And then it worked on the state and updated the state and passed back the results, right? Now let's go back again. So common types of nodes, we have LLM calls, tool execution, data processing, validation, routing, and decisions, right? Now, edges, right? Edge is a connection between nodes that control flow, right? So you add one edge from A to B, and you'll see that later, right? And you can also have conditional edges, right? So basically an edge is like a line from one node to another, right? In this graph here, we only have one node, right? So we have that node here. We added an edge to it, to the end node. But basically, we added a node and then we set it as an entry point. That means we connected it to the start. And then we also added an edge from that one node to the end. Right. Okay. So let's move on. Now, so basically, essentially how it connects, right? So you go from the start, right? It gets to the agent. The state is a shared memory that's declared in the agent, right? If there are tools, it uses the tools. In this example, it didn't have any tools, right? If the tool will then return a result back to the agent, right? The tool returns a result to the agent once it's done. If the agent realizes that it needs more tools, right? It could run, there could be multiple tools running, basically more than one tools, right? Running. And then once the agent is okay about what is happening, it can check if any more tools are needed, and if they're not, then it goes to the end. And that's how the loop continues until it achieves what it wants to do. Okay, so just before we go ahead, we need, some, basic things. We're gonna change the way we run Ignode, just to simplify things a little bit. So first of all, let me open my Docker. Right, again, and then I'm gonna stop this container. Oh, sorry, remove rather. All right, so now that Docker container is gone, right? And I'm going to come to this repository. So again, in Bitbucket, I think we've been using this, for tutorials so far, right? Just go to Let's Code with Francis, right? And then we want this one, Docker Ignode AI Agent Builder. So we want to download this file. So just come here, go to Downloads, and then just download the repository. And once you've downloaded the repository, that's enough. That's all we need to do. You can now open. We can open our folder again, right? So we can open our folder again, and then we can copy what we downloaded there. So let me just do that quickly. Copy it, unzip it first, and then copy it over. So I'm just gonna copy it over there, right? And then I'm gonna rename it. And you see some of the examples, so you can follow some of the text here, and we would use them, right? Basically, we're going to run our container from here, right? And so you can see that we have everything set up here, right? So the agent builder from the same agent builder we got from Docker, so it's here. So we're just going to run it from here. Right now, it's tied to an open API key, so we have to set that open API key. So what we could just do again is we can copy our key like we did before, right? And just paste it here. That way we're not always copying and pasting like we've been doing, right? So we just take that out. You could use the name on the environment variable if you do have an env file. But for now, we'll just run it from here like this, right? And then just click on Run Service up here. Now, with this run service, everything will be set up. There's some volumes created, right, and all of that. And now the container, everything is running. So whatever we create now, at least, will be stored. Previously, the way we ran it, we didn't really have it tied to any volume, right? So if we were to open back, we could close this. You can see this is gone, right? So leave. Close this. If we refresh, you'll see that project is gone because there were no volumes and it wasn't safe. But with running it this way, because now we set the volumes, we create a volume and set it to store there, right? So now the data will be stored, so we can create applications and then we can have them saved so that we can retrieve them next time, right? So now we want to create our next AI agent, right? And we're gonna call it HR LLM Manager, right? And we're gonna create an open and then open it, right? So again, we come with the default base agent. We're gonna delete this connection. Use the delete button. We're gonna put this a little bit towards the side. It's down here, and we can keep that up. We can keep that here. We're now gonna bring in what we call a classifier, right? And this is actually an LLM agent. It's actually an agent, but it helps us. Its primary role is just to classify and give a single output. It's just to simplify things for us, right? And so we're gonna connect this start here, right? First of all, let's make sure we enable this, right? Let's make sure, like we did in the previous video, so that we can have. For this one, we won't need history. We don't require the history. We could, but I don't think we need the history, but we do want it to be continuous, right? But we don't need to enable the history. Anyway, we'll see, right? And then we can have the classifier. First of all, we need the classifier classify different things for us. And what are we trying to classify, right? So basically, we wanted to classify if it should go to tech support, right? Or if it should go to billing, or if it should go to HR, right? So we can do this. We can say we're gonna add a few categories, 3 actually to be precise, and we're gonna say technical support, and we're gonna say billing. And we're going to say here HR assistance. So now, but we need to tell our agent what to do, right? So we need to give it an identity, right? Just call it, first of all, we'll give it a label, HR classifier, right? And we need to give it an identity, right? And I think if you go here in the examples, I have it right there. So we're creating a HR agent with no tools, right? So for the classifier agent, we want to give it an identity. So we'll tell it that you are a precise HR email classification system that needs to route employee inquiries to the correct department. And so that is the identity, right? So we're going to copy that. And we're just going to go back to Ignode Agent Builder. And we're going to use that in the identity. Oh, why is that not copied? So let's go back. Copy that. And just make sure we have it. That is weird. Alright, I'll copy it from here. Not sure why. Alright, so the classifier, and then we just copy this from here. And that should work fine, right? So you're a precise HR email classifier routes to the correct department. So we want to route it to the correct department, right? And now that we have that, we also want to give it instructions on what to do, right? After it classifies it, right? What does it like? How does it do the classification, right? What principles does it use? And so we can go back. Let's just use it from here, right? So here are some cases that I've written up, right? So basically, this is the classification. So technical support, right? Billing inquiry, right? And then HR assistance, right? And so it looks like this format says billing inquiry. So let's just make sure we have it in here also. So billing inquiry, because we want to match that properly. So we're telling it how to classify the inputs, right? So we have technical support, billing inquiry, and HR assistance, right? And so now the next thing we have to do now is we'll copy, so here are the rules, right? So apart from, so you classify, technical support, IT, technology related things, right? Network connectivity, equipment request, billing inquiry, financial payments, and anything like that. HR assistance for human resources and workplace matters, right? So these are how it should classify. We have to give it as much information as possible so it understands, right? And then these are the rules. So it's okay, analyze the email carefully, and based on the email, classify it into one of those, right? 3, right? And we told it again. And the default handling is, if the topic is unclear, just send it to HR and let HR deal with it, right? And then output format, this is the output format. So we're going to copy the classification cases, right? And we're just going to put that in the instructions. So that's the instruction for the classifier, right? Now, to be able to, because we're going to use multiple agents, right? We're going to have one agent for technical support, another agent for billing, and another agent for HR assistant, right? We're going to have 3 different agents, each with its own unique identity. We are going to need to find a way to trigger each of these. And for that, we're going to use a switch, right? And so we'll have the input going into the switch, and then the output from the switch will go to one of these agents. And so what we have to do here now is the switch requires a value. Like, what are we trying to switch, right? If we get a value, which output should we send it to? It's just coding, basic logic, right? So we'll have one for, we'll have the classifier store a value in a variable in the state, right? And even though there is a classifier object that we can get data from, you can see, but we'll have to access the category of that directly, right? So just to avoid anything, we're just going to create a new value here. We're just going to say, call it classifier output. I think that sounds good, right? So we're going to call it classifier output, right? Classifier output, right? So basically what we're saying here, so we create a new variable called classifier output, right? And it's a string, right? You can put a description if you want. And we're going to tell the HR agent, which this is supposed to be a string, to store it in the classifier output variable, right? So we see it's state.classifier output. So it's going to store it in a classifier output. Now, from the classifier output, we're going to do the switch, right? From the classifier output, we're going to do the switch, but we want 3 cases, right? What is the output here? We told the HR agent to only send out or classify things based on technical support, billing, and HR assistance. So basically, it's going to send any one of these 3 out to this to this switch. And now we need to use the output now to then be able to classify them, right? So we'll just call this a classify switch, right? And now we'll have one for, just make sure I don't make any typing errors. We'll have one for technical support. We'll have one for billing inquiry. And we'll have one for HR assistance. Put that in here. And then once we have that done, I think that's all we need. So that's enough. So each of this output, we can now link it to each of the agents that's required. So one goes there, another goes here, and this last one goes here. And then each of these now will go here to the end. We're going to link them all to the end. So this is our flow, right? So basically, it starts with whatever input. We classify that input. Once we've classified that input, we put it in a variable in the state. We send it to the switch. The switch figures out who should it route it to. It routes it to the proper agent. And then those agents take care of it and give out a result. And so how do we want to deal with these agents, right? So first of all, the first agent we can call, we'll call this agent technical support. Right, because that's what it is, right? This agent will be billing. And this agent, let's say billing support. And then this agent will be HR support. Okay. So there are three different agents. Now, each of them should have a different identity. So let's give them an identity. So I'm going to come back here. We're going to go to our billing agent. Let's start from our technical support agent, right? So we're going to say you are Greg, right? That's the identity. His name, our agent's name is Greg, a friendly, knowledgeable technical support specialist at the company's IT help desk, right? So we're going to copy that. So that is Greg. We're dealing with identity here, right? So Greg is the technical support agent. And this is what we wanted to do, right? Make sure that email tone is professional, empathetic, clear, you know. So you have to tell the agent, you have to give it a ton of information so it knows what to do, right? The response structure, right? We tell it how to respond. You know, make sure you greet, right? You confirm the issue has been logged, right? You, for technical support, start with TKT, right? And then status, provide the current status, right? Assignment, provide who it's been assigned to, right? Either the person is in the network or the software applications or hardware division or access, basically there's a network team, an application team, hardware support team, security team, general IT team, and then troubleshooting, right? So usually 2 to 3 days relevant, right? Closing. So these are information that the agent requires, the technical support agent requires. So we're going to copy that for the instructions on what it needs to do. And we're going to paste that in here. Right, so basically this is us telling the technical support agent what to do, right? Just make sure to tell it to respond using an email form. Let's see if that helps, right? So now that is our technical support. We're going to do the same thing for billing, right? So this is the identity of our billing agent. Just going to copy the identity. Yeah, so this is Sarah, and Sarah is detailed oriented billing support specialist in the finance department, right? So basically, Sarah is our billing agent, and we're going to put that there. And then we're also going to copy, the instructions. those are the instructions for Sarah. And we'll just make sure we have that also. Let's just call it send response. Text. That's probably good. So we're gonna just put it here. Here. Same thing here. I'm just gonna have that here first. And this agent is our billing agent, right? No, sorry, we already did billing, right? We're doing HR now. Okay. So this is our HR agent, and the HR agent's name is Maya. Maya is the HR agent, and so we're gonna just add that there, right? And then we're going to then put the response style, how it should respond. And pretty much that's all of it, right? So you can see here now that basically we have data coming in from here, going to the classifier. The classifier classifies it, sends it to the switch, which then routes it to the proper agent, and then that agent responds. So we're going to go ahead and save this. Once saved, we can now load it in Jupyter Lab. And now again, we can run to install. This is a new environment, so just take a while to install. Sorry about that, because we had to restart the using Docker Compose this time around. But the good thing is that we don't have to worry about this part anymore, right? So because now we can get it from the environment variable. Hope that works, right? Now, so basically now we can run the code. There's nothing breaking, so it looks like the code was generated properly. And then let's run the graph. All right, so you see what happened, right? You start from the start, right? It sends it to the classifier. The classifier then sends it to the, classifies it and sends it to the switch. And the switch then says, okay, is it going to billing? Is it going to HR? Or is it going to technical support? And these are conditional nodes. That's why they're all in dashes. And when it's done, then it goes to the end. And so that is our graph, right? And now we run this. And now let's run the agent and test, right? So we have any... okay. Let's make sure I have the right thing here. Okay, so let's go ahead and test, right? So now we're going to ask a few questions, right? And let's see our questions. So first question is, we're going to say, hi, my name is Rupert. I have some issues with my computer. It keeps rebooting. And I cannot use it for my work. Can you help? So that's the question. Let's see what the AI agent does with this, right? So you can see what happens, right? Let's study this pretty much. It says, hi, my name is Rupert. I have some issues with my computer. It keeps rebooting. I cannot use it for my work. Can you help? And you can see what happens next. We go to the classifier input. The classifier then classifies it as a technical support issue, right? And then it goes to the switch, and then the switch then switched it to the the classify switch, sorry, which then sends it to the technical support agent, right? That's now it's executing technical support agent, right? So it says subject, support ticket, and it gave it a number, right? And it says computer rebooting issues. Hi, Rupert. Thank you for reaching out. I'm very sorry to hear about the trouble you're experiencing with your computer constantly rebooting. I understand how frustrating this must be, especially when it affects your work. So you see, because we gave it like a personality, it's kind of talking in the kind of personality we asked it to talk in, right? Your issues have been logged with reference number ticket this. The status is currently under review. You can expect to get a response within 24 to 48 hours. I've assigned your case to Mike Chen, right, from our hardware support team, who is the best equipped to assist with this kind of issue. So remember, we had told the different people in the different support teams, right? In the meantime, here are a few things you can try. So it actually tried to help a little bit by, proposing a few things, right? And thank you for your patience as we work to resolve this. So very simple, right? So you can see that we were able to create an AI agent who kind of understands the situation, sends it to the right person, and we're able to work from there. So let's try something different. Let's ask another question. From me this time, right? So, hi, my name is Francis. It seems I do not have access to some employee trainings. Can someone help? So let's see what happens. So basically, it got the input. You can see that. You can see it got the input, right? It got the input. Can someone help? The HR classifier took that input and was able to classify it as a confidence of 95%, right? And then with a confidence score of 95%. And it sends HR, with employee trainer. So you can see that the subject here is a little different. But the reason is because we didn't tell it how it should do the subject. We didn't specify in the message that always have the subject in this format. If we had specified that, it would have a unique subject output for each of them, right? But we didn't specify that. But we did specify that it have an ID. So I hope the ID is here. So it probably has the ID, but okay, here it is, right? The case number, right? Okay. So it says, hi, Francis, thank you for reaching out. I'm glad you contacted us about this. I've logged your request under case number HR 58239 for our records, right? Your inquiry about accessing employee trainings fall under training and development category, and our learning development team is here to assist you. Typically, access to these issues can be resolved within 24 to 48 hours. In the meantime, I'd recommend you check in our learning portal to ensure your login credentials are up to date. If you haven't already discussed your development goals with your manager might also provide additional guidance on recommended courses, right? So rest assured, your inquiry will be handled with utmost confidentiality. And if you have any more assistance or further questions, please feel free to reach out. Warm regards, Maya. So you can see this was from Greg, right? And this was from Maya, right? So basically, two different personalities, two different emails, right? But one thing we asked was that at least the ticket ID be sent, right? And it created different emails in both cases. And we gave it formats also for what's required in these emails and how it should respond. So you see, the personality of the HR agent is really different from the personality of the tech support agent. Now let's ask another question. I'm just gonna copy this. So this would be from, so this is from Marcel. right? And let's send a question and then we can read it, right? So I said, "Hi, my name is Marcel. I'm not sure what happened, but I did not receive the payment for the goods we supplied to your office location in Statesboro, Georgia last Friday. Can I get some explanation? And can someone look into this?" And it classified this as billing, right? Yeah, okay. With a 95%. So you can see the IDs start from billing. This is from HR. And this is from technical support, right? So it says, "Hi Marcel, thank you for reaching out regarding your payment concern for goods and assistance supplied to our Statesboro office. I understand how important this is to resolve your issue promptly. Your inquiry has been logged on a case number bill 47362. Yeah, so personality, totally different. Each of them has different personality because of the instructions that we have given to them. So this is a great case for how we can, let me just exit. So this is a great case for how we can, create a system, for a company. Could be a company you work hard or, using AI agents in a way that kind of helps productivity, right? It takes the input and response. Now, the difference from this is that this doesn't really do any action at this point. It responds to an email, but if you were to ask it something about that support ticket, it wouldn't know what to do because we're not saving it. And the conversation histories, we're not even using it. But now that takes us to our next project. Okay, so previously we talked about the use of tools and how helpful tools can be when you maybe talking to, something external, a database, MQTT server, sending an email, right? And we're going to try to use a tool now and modify our current agent to be able to at least make it store something in a database, right? Information about that ticket. Previously, it just created a ticket number, right? It generated some random ticket number. It didn't even use a tool. It just generated it on its own because we told it to, right? But we could specify how we want that number to be generated. We could tell it, use this tool to generate that number. And then we can say, use this tool so that if we want it a certain way, so that we know we're keeping track of it properly rather than the AI just generating anything, right? We can keep track of how it's generating it properly. And then we could also say, use this tool to, store this data. And then use this tool to get the data, right? Something like that. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to modify our current AI agent to be able to do something like that, right? And so here's what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to rename this agent. Let's just say HR React Manager, right? Sounds better. Now, basically, it's going to reason and it's going to make an action based off of that, right? So HR React Manager, we're going to save this. So let's save to database. We're going to save it as, we'll call it HR React Manager. Let's just make sure it saves it separately. I may have overwritten the previous one. Let me check. Okay, yeah, it's there. Okay, so I specified the name that I was saying. So we have the LLM one still there. Now we have a new React one. Okay. So this is our React Manager. Now, we know the classifier works. We know that it can classify things, right? And we know that the switch works. So we don't need to change those, right? Now, settings all remain the same. But the agents are going to be different because they're going to be totally different. This time around, these agents need to work with tools, right? And they need to have a different kind of personality. And to find that in here in our project, let me open this. So let's start with our tech support guy, Greg, right? So Greg is, your name is Greg, your technical support assistant, right? And we're going to tell it the tools that are available. We're going to say, okay, you need two tools, Greg. You need a SQLite tool, which will be used for storing and retrieving ticket records. And you need a UUID generator tool, right? For generating unique ticket IDs, right? And then we're going to say, also, Greg, you have 3 members, right? And you want to rotate the assignments across these 3 members, right? And then we want to have a workflow that says check for the existing tickets, right? First of all, right? That's the first thing you do. Check for the existing tickets based on the user's email or the name. If found, reference the existing ticket and provide an update on that. So if there's a new update on the existing ticket, you want the AI agent to say, oh, okay, there was an update. I sent it to Maria, and Maria has an update. Maria now is in progress now after I sent it the last time, and then provide the status back, for that email. Now, for new issues, generate a unique UUID, append tech service. So we're now telling it how to set the ID, right, to it, and get the final ticket ID format. Assign an appropriate team member based on the issue type. Store the records of this ticket. Ensure that the response to the user contains the final ticket ID, right? For existing issues, retrieve the current status, provide progress updates, and update record if status changed, right? Response must include ticket ID for reference, ticket engineer name and specialty, assign the engineer's name and specialty, status, helpful troubleshooting tips, expected response time, and you need to be cordial, helpful, and professional. So let's copy this response, and we're going to copy this, and we're going to put this in billing. We're just gonna paste that here. So we've told him what tools. So we need 2 tools, SQLite tool and UUID generator. So we're gonna go down here and we're gonna add those 2 tools. So UUID generator should be in basic tools, right? So there's already a pre-set up thing here at Ignode. Ignode agent builder, so you just add that tool, and we'll add another tool for SQLite, and that should be on the file and data, and we'll have SQLite file operations, right? And we've defined, so these are important. You see this here, these tell the agents how to use this tool, right? So without these comments, the agent would be able to understand how to use the SQLite tool, and we're going to save that. So now this agent, we've told it what tool to use, and we've told it how to generate the ID, and we've given it all the resources that it needs at this point, right? Now, let's go to the billing support agent. Sarah, right? And then here our billing support agent is Kenny. That changed. I guess we should use Sarah. It's fine. We can just copy this, so we don't have to change that. It's all the same. It's just an identity, right? We've told it also the tools to use, the team members, the workflow, the resolution time, the response. So basically you have to tell it what it needs to do, right? So that's it. I'm going to copy that. Oh, you know what? We can change that to Kenny, right? We can just move. We'll change that to Kenny, right? So, oh, I forgot. Yeah, Kenny doesn't have any tools. So we're going to add new tools. We're going to add the SQLite tool. So we're just going to add the tool. Basic tools, UUID generator. Kenny needs the UUID generator to generate IDs. Kenny also needs the SQLite file operations tool, right? And so those 2 tools now have been given to Kenny. And now let's go to our HR support person. And that would be Pauline, right? Is that Pauline? Did we change the name? Oh, yeah, we did. All right, so let's change it to Pauline. Looks like we got new people hired. Not sure what's happening in the HR department, but that is weird. Okay. Right, we got new agents hired. Anyways, so we've given Pauline the different tools, right? So let's get the tools. Well, okay, Pauline needs these tools. These are Pauline's team members. This is the workflow. So basically, the agent now has a different personality. Resolution times, response for the ticket, and all of that. So you can see we said it should start. This one starts with HR service, right? This billing starts with billing service, and this one also starts with tech service. So let's go ahead and put the instructions for Pauline. And so now we'll have Pauline have her instructions. Oh, sorry, I wanted that email there. So let's just to make sure it sends it as an email format. All right, so now, and we're gonna do something different. We're gonna say here, response subject must contain the ticket ID. Just gonna, okay, just gonna put it at the top there. So remember the other time it wasn't, the responses we got were kind of unified, right? So we're gonna switch it up a little bit this time. Make sure they always add it in the ticket ID, right? Just make sure we called it ticket ID. Yep, it called ticket ID. Okay. So, and we need to give it the tools because without the tools, it wouldn't be able to use what we specified. So we're going to add basic tools. We're going to add a UUID generator tool. And we're also going to add a SQLite operations tool. And we're going to save those two. And I think that's all we have to do. So we have Greg. Pauline. We have Kenny. And we have Greg. And Greg is still in IT. Greg really loves IT. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this now. Update the workflow. Okay. I'm going to load it to Jupyter Lab. All right. I think that does it. Right. So now, oh, this is the previous one. We can cancel that. Keep the new one. So these we already installed. So requirement already satisfied. We can now do the import for the what we need here. That's good. We already added OpenAI key to the environment variable. We run the workflow, no code errors, that's nice. And now we generate the flow. It's the same flow, nothing changed, right? And now let's run the agent. Oh, one thing I forgot, we should have named this like an HR agent, right? So we can change this message that pops up here. Let me just exit search here. So you see here it says I am a helpful AI agent. How can I help you? Right, let's exit this. Let's for good practice, right? Let's go back to our agent. We'll go to the start. And then we'll say I am a helpful HR agent. How can I help you, right? So basically you can change that message, right? Because we're specific now to work, right? So let's do that. Update workflow. Okay. Saved that. Now let's generate the Jupyter Lab. And now let's run this. Requirement is satisfied already. Everything looks good. Everything looks good. Everything looks good. And now we are there. Right. So this is the chart, right? So now it says I'm a helpful HR agent. Now I know I can ask questions. Okay. So what are we gonna ask? we can ask the same questions we asked previously and see what happens, right? So let's go ahead and ask the same questions. We get those questions quickly. So Rupert asked. So let me type Rupert's questions. So watch what happens, right? I have some issues. So this is Rupert. Let me enter. And so you're going to see what happens here, right? So hi, my name is Rupert. I have some issues with my computer. I cannot, keeps rebooting. I cannot use it for work, right? So you can see it classifies the HR to, it classifies it as technical support, right? You can see a file was created here, agentdata.db, because in the instructions, we had asked it to use the tool to save it to the database, right? So it created a database because the database didn't exist before. So it used the tool to create the database, and you can see the database here. So, and it says evaluating the switch, and use the classify switch, and then it added the subject, your support ticket ID is tech. With this, we asked it to use a UUID generator, so it got a UUID, and it added tech service to it. And then it says, dear Rupert, thank you for reaching out. Technical support team created a new ticket to address your issues, and it gave the information on the ticket, the assigned engineer, Mike Chen, and the status as open. It seems your computer is experiencing a reboot issue. Here's a few troubleshooting tips. So he gave it some troubleshooting tips, which just looks okay. And it says, our team will review your issue and get back to you with a resolution within 24 to 48 hours. So you see that, basically Greg really did his job, right? And now let's ask another question, this time around from me, Francis. And now we're going to paste Francis's question. And you can see it took Francis's questions and it says, oh, I don't have employee training. Again, it classified it as HR assistance, right? And it put the HR support. It executed the HR support agent, right? Here, it executed the technical support agent, right? And now it says, you can see the subject. It added the ID in the subject now in both cases, right? Because now we asked it to always add it in it. We didn't give it the format to add it, but so it's kind of flexible there, because we didn't give it a format, but we told it to make sure it's there. And it made sure it's there, right? So now it says, dear Francis, thanks for reaching out to us. I understand you're experiencing difficulties, some employee trainings, and it gives, the different information. Basically, it just tells me what to do, right? And it says they'll try to address it. And now we'll ask a third question, right? So let's ask the question from Marcel this time around. And we're going to type in the question from Marcel. Let's see if it's able to classify it properly. And you could see here that it classified it as billing because Marcel is the supply guy in Statesboro, Georgia. Right. So classified as billing support, and it added also in the ID. So you can see in all three cases now, it came in the ID. Now it says, thank you, Marcel, for reaching out. And it gave the, question, gave the email there. Now, let's look at this. So basically, what if we asked it a question about a ticket ID, right? So basically, if we say copy, sorry, it's not really worded copy here. Copies the whole thing, copies the whole cell sometimes, right? So if we say, remember, we didn't really, the classify agent, we didn't really give it the ID, but we told it to classify it properly and send to the right agent. So basically, if we say this is a bill service, it'll say, oh, okay, this is for billing. If it says this is for HR service, that classifier, even though it doesn't know much, the initial classifier here, right? If there's a no, it knows from that ID, right, what it should reference it to, right? And we can say, what is the status of this ID? Can you give me me updates. So basically, this is not a new email, right? First of all, the classifier classified it. You could see, even though it didn't really have much, it just had the ID. It didn't really have the full context of the problem, but it had the ID. It could say, okay, this is definitely for tech support. And it sent it to the technical support agent, right? With the technical support then got it, and it checked, okay, it says update on this. It knew it was Rupert. Remember, Rupert asked the first question on the technical support right here, right? So this was technical support, and I told him my name was Rupert here, and that information, but you can see, but now all I did was just ask it about that, right? And remember, we didn't put on the history, so it has no context of the history. So what happened? It went into the database and it got the information related to that ticket. Now, let's ask something again. Let's ask the one from Marcel, right? Let's ask the billing one from Marcel. So it classified it as billing. It sent it to the billing support agent, and it knew it was Marcel, right? Without the history. The only reason it was able to do that was it looked it up in the database, right? And it was able to identify what to do next. And we can show that, right? So first, let me download this. I'm gonna download this. And then I'm going to just copy it in here. A second. So you can see it here, right? It had the ticket ID. It saved them in the database, right? It had the names of the people, and that's where it got the names from. Not really sure why it put the email there. We didn't really specify much on that. So I guess it had the flexibility. Usually you got to tell it a little more about things so it doesn't hallucinate, right? It set the category, right? Set the description, set the status, and who it was assigned to, right? And when it was created and updated. So you see, basically, what we've been able to do now is we were able to create something that can actually act with the real world. Imagine just, previously it was just an agent that just sends a response. It doesn't really know what is happening. But now we can connect to something outside of the agent. The agent can talk to something outside of it. It could maybe search the internet. It could search a company database. It could search somewhere and get the information that it needs. It could write information somewhere, and it could actually become a helpful agent, right? And that is the definition of what we call a React agent. It reasons and it acts. And with this now, we are going to go to our next project. We'll be applying what we've learned so far into building an IoT agent.